Hello, and thank you very much for having a look at my YouTube channel again. I know it's been some time since I last put up a video of our travels to London in the series called London Bound. The last one I published was part 6, and that was some time back. I'm going to finish the series, and this episode is called London Bound Part 7, Stuck on the Bottom, because that's what happened on our travels this particular day. I hope you enjoyed the film. Thank you very much again for watching. Please feel free to like, comment and subscribe. Thank you very much. Bye. In this video we approach on the summit pound of the Grand Union Cowroast lock, which we will then go down. Indeed, all the locks, all the way to London from now on, it is all downhill. So passing through Cowroast Lock, Dudswell locks, followed by North Church Lock, Bushes Lock and Gas 1 and 2 locks, we approach and moor at Berkhamsted, where we stop for 3 nights. After that we will pass through Berkhamsted and then descend Topside Lock, Bottom Side Lock, Sewer Lock, the Winkwell locks, Winkwell Swing Bridge and more just after Bridge 148. So we're just passing the entrance to Cowroast Marina and about to arrive at Cowroast Lock. This summer the water levels were fine so far, but there had been restriction notices on the use of flights of locks such at Stoke Bruin and Watford. Arriving at Cowroast Lock, there was no notices about any restrictive operating times, and you can see in the film there, it looks as though the gates had recently been replaced and the water is quite clear. So we went through Cowroast Lock, that's a view of it. Still the water's lovely and clear here with some nice reeds growing. Just before we do so, there's another interesting boat here on the left, the blue one. Got an outboard engine, steer from the stern. Looks a bit like a lifeboat, but I don't think it is. Quite an interesting boat, that one. Now this is where things went a bit wrong at Dudswell Upper Lock. I went down the lock and then realised that the water level was a bit low, and I should have noticed that before I'd gone down the lock with the boat. And another boat had come up saying the water levels were rather low. So the boat coming up from the lower of the 2 Dudswell locks had asked me to run some water through, which is a bit hard to do when you're right in the bottom of a lock on the lowest section. So I came out of the lock, and luckily a Canal and River Trust gentleman arrived to run some water down, and I get stuck on the bottom And you can see that these other two boats that were going uphill at the locks also got stuck. And in looking at the edge there, you can see how the water is down. Luckily, it turned out to be just that pound that we had an issue with, just between the two Dudswell locks, locks 48 and 47. But then we noticed at the next lock, the lower of the two Dudswell flights, that one of the gates had issues, and it followed a trend that at some of the locks there was a notice asking you to have the lock empty after you'd gone through it. So rather, whether you were going uphill or downhill, the lock was meant to be left empty after you'd gone through it. So this is the boat on the right that a notice was about it sinking. I think it was an old wooden narrowboat. Bit of a shame, but it went past slowly so as not to cause any more damage, hopefully. But you can see there it's leaning over at quite an angle, and those batteries and that tin of paint look as though they could fall in the water at any moment. We passed quite a few interesting looking boats on our way down the canal towards Berkhamsted. Still some lovely scenery, so I'll let you take in the view there. Quite a few people out, either walking or running along the towpath. I thought that was quite an interesting bow of a narrowboat with a dragon on it. I think it's made by a company called Dragon Narrowboats. And another boat here that looks as though it needs a little bit of tender loving care. And then narrowboaters' worst nightmare, fishermen. Quite a few of them in a competition, so you had to go very slowly and wait for them to lift their rods. We're now approaching Berkhamsted. Another wide beam boat there. And there's a couple of locks just before you get to the town centre at Berkhamsted called Gas 1 Lock and Gas 2 Lock. So we decided to moor up in Berkhamsted, and one of the fortunate things about mooring there is that there is a Waitrose supermarket literally the other side of the trees on your right hand side, just beyond the towpath. And we stopped at Berkhamsted for 3 nights. We were able to do some shopping. We'd ordered some new cushions for the bow at the Crick Festival, and those were delivered to us here in Berkhamsted. There was this nice little walk just the other side of the towpath, and they called it Canal Fields. It was just slightly lower down than the canal. That's the Waitrose supermarket and its car park, and that's the other side of the canal where there is a playground and a bridge there. You can see in the film where you can walk between the two sides of the canal. So on our last day of leaving Berkhamsted. We filled up with water before we set off. We're just coming now to lock 53, one of the Berkhamsted locks. Leaving lock 53. Travelling along the canal here, it felt as though we went round an S-bend and past Berkhamsted railway station, which is literally next door to the canal, so a good place to moor if you want to travel somewhere by train. Just round the bend here is Bridge 141, or Castle Street Bridge, followed shortly afterwards by a totem pole standing some 9 metres tall or 30 feet and erected in 1968. That new housing, you can see, was built on the site of Castle Street Wharf. We passed the Crystal Palace pub. Turning around to look back at Bridge 141, the sign reads on the top, Francis Egerton of Berkhamsted, and underneath, 1736, the Canal Duke, 1803. The Castle Wharf area of Berkhamsted that we're just passing through was once the centre of canal trade and boat building. A beautiful looking house here and some beautiful boats. And of course the area was known as the Port of Berkhamsted. At Rising Sun Lock, which we're just approaching now, we were caught up with another boat, or another boat shared the lock with us. And the next few locks, which was very helpful, particularly on these wide beam locks on the Grand Union Canal, makes the life a lot easier. So we're just passing yet another final pub in Berkhamsted, and then moving out into the countryside. Lots of nice properties around here. There appeared to be quite a few liveaboard boaters around this area just before we arrive at the next lock, lock 56. At this lock we had to wait for a boat to come up it, and that happened to be YouTube People Well Deck Diaries. On the journey down to London, we certainly pass a lot of unusual boats, and this is one of them. I wonder if somebody sat in the remnants of the car welded to the deck of this narrowboat and steered it. It certainly might be a nice sheltered place on a cold, wet day. It might be a bit too hot in summer. Anyway, each to their own, but absolutely fantastic. I mentioned about having to leave locks empty after one gone through them. Here's a notice on the gate. Due to leakage through lock chamber walls when exiting the lock, please make sure that the paddles are left up on the lower gates. Some narrowboats were built with only steel hulls and the upper structure was either wood or fiberglass. This is an example of a wooden one, but I think it's seen better days. I wouldn't trust it on a wet day to be dry inside. Approaching Winkwell Swing Bridge, I'd phoned ahead and checked that the boatyard just after the bridge, called Middlesex and Herts Boat Services, could do a pump out for our toilet. So very kindly the hire boats let us go through first, and they operated the electrical mechanism of the swing bridge, and after going through the bridge hole we moored up to get a pump out. After the toilet pump out we carried on, going through lock 61 and passing all the moored boats at the Middlesex and Herts Boat Services area. Some of them are quite interesting, especially that one with a skeleton in the crutch. In hindsight, I'd wished we'd probably moored for the night near Winkwell Swing Bridge, but we then carried on looking for a mooring for the evening. That meant going through lock 62 and stopping for the night eventually before lock 63. I thought this would be a bit quieter and away from the railway line. So just before we moor up for the night, after bridge 148, I'm going to say thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe if you want to, and like, and I'll say cheerio and hope to see you in part 8 of our journey to London. Thank you. Cheerio.